these are two teams that I love because I love rooting for the underdogs, and they're not necessarily underdogs anymore this season. I can't even choose a side for this one because I'm just excited to watch it. But how would you lean, Tank, after watching the Seahawks defense kind of step up and help Geno Smith out the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, this one's interesting. Yeah, you raised some really great points about the Seahawks. Like K9 has been eating. He's a dog with that ball in his hands. And then Gino, just seeing the passion that he plays with in certain moments in the game. I mean, there are a couple of instances where some things weren't going his way, and then he was able to connect on like a long third and long, and he would look at the sideline or look at other places. He was barking a little bit. I'm like, yo, like Gino has that dog back. Like all players, especially when you go through that adversity that he has early on
Yeah.
and all the way up until this year, like you kind of lose a little bit of that essence, that fire that made you a great player in high school and college and to become a number one draft pick and all that stuff. And so for him to like find that again and to kind of exude that presence, like, yo, I'm back.
Yeah.
Like it's amazing to watch. So I just needed to say that. But then on top of that, like the two interesting stats to me in this game is that the Seattle defense gives up the fourth most points per game in the league. New
Hmm.
York Giants defense gives up the sixth fewest points. And I think the Giants defense, I mean, some of that goes to who they played. I mean, they played teams like the Packers who have struggled, the Bears and things like that. But at the same time, I feel like when you have that confidence, like they played. I mean, that's what they are. That's what the stats tell you. That's what they are. And so I feel like they're a solid defense. And I feel like what I saw from Daniel Jones last week, where you anticipate the Giants coming out and being super run heavy, and then yet he's throwing the ball. Like he's using
Hmm.
Wandale Robinson, he's using Darius Slayton. They're not scared to take advantage of those matchups. Now that being said, like that Seattle secondary has been playing better. Like if you really want to attack them, you want to attack them on the run. And Saquon has been a monster, so they can do that too. So if I want to lean as I talk my way through it, this is tough. Honestly, this is
Yeah.
tough because these are two really good football teams. Like I have in my notes that I would probably want to lean to the Seahawks if I had to pick a side just because they're playing at home. But I mean, how many times can you go against the Giants where in every situation they just find some way to
Find
win?
some way to win.
Just look at last week. So
Hmm.
that being said, let me go back to this total, and it's at 44 and a half. And I think that the Seattle Seahawks can probably score more points than a lot of teams have on the Giants. And I'm not worried about the Giants scoring points on Seattle. So let's take
Hmm.
over 44 and a half.
I like it. The Seahawks offense is averaging 26 points per game right now. So that is a really, really good look. But the Giants, they have won 6 games this season because of three reasons. Not because of their offense, but because of Saquon Barkley, their defense, and the coaching schemes of Brian Dable. He's been able to outcoach almost every single coach that he's gone up against. Jared, does it happen here in week 8 against Pete Carroll and the Seattle Seahawks, or do the Seahawks come out victorious at home?
There's a lot of things weighing on my mind here. So the first thing I
Sorry.
have to
I know
do is
this is a tough
remove.
one for you.
No, honestly, it is, but you have to. Time out.
That look on her face too is amazing.
She is. She is Tank. I swear,
I
she
love
made a
it.
bet last year on Trayvon Diggs to record an interception. It was her best bet of the day, and I pooped all over it, and it
I got it
won.
like
And
plus 500 or something.
a
Yeah.
year later, Tank. A year later, it's like it's. I still get it. It's like they never forget. When she's basically my work wife. They never forget. They never forget.
And the
So
wife is always right, right? Is
Yeah,
that what they
and
wife,
they
say?
make
happy
sure
wife,
and they make sure you never
happy life.
forget.
Yeah, happy wife, happy life. But objectively, let's remove emotion from this equation. Let's just do a simple line analysis game before we even dive into the handicap here. So last week, the Jaguars were -3 at home against the Giants. This week,
Hmm.
the Seahawks are -3 at home against the Giants. Seahawks, Jaguars playing on a neutral. Who's the better team? Who's the favorite there? Your mind probably says Seattle, right? Their quarterback's playing better. That's what the numbers say. Seattle probably would be a slight favorite from what I'm hearing
Hmm.
on a neutral against Jacksonville. So just line analysis based off of last week's opponent. I think we are getting a little bit, a hair of value, maybe a half a point or a point on Seattle at -3. And that's a big half a point if you take it off of that key number. So just out of the gates, take any emotion from last week out of it. I think we see a little bit of value on Seattle. Now let's look at the actual handicap of this game. Well, I think the most important thing, I think there's two very important factors to consider in this game. First of all, the Giants were a little bit banged up offensively in that game last week, mostly on the offensive line. Evan Neal, their fantastic rookie right tackle, probably isn't going to play this week. Left guard, Brent Bredeson, also, quote unquote, week to week with a knee injury. Now, on the flip side, they are activating Nick Gates, who I don't know if you know this story. Last year, he was a starting center. I think he played either guard or center. And he injured his left leg or right leg. I forget which leg, but he broke it. It was snapped in half and he had to be carted off the field. It was an emotional return. Very gruesome injury. He's returning this week. So a little bit of a, uplifting story on the offensive line, but they still lose two starters, Neal and Bredeson, which is noteworthy. Tank mentioned the Seattle defense. I want to give the Seattle defense some love. The Seattle defense is trending in a very positive direction. Over the last 2 weeks, they're 4th in EPA per play, and that's up from 31st in weeks 1 through 5. And I think the first-year defensive coordinator, Clint Hurt, gets a ton of credit here, starting to push the right buttons. This was a guy that was the defensive line coach for the prior 4 years, took over this year for Ken Norton Jr. And, of course, Seattle's defense has been so bad over the last few years. But, again, the secondary really starting to play well. So they held Justin Herbert to 5.7 yards per attempt last week. That's the second lowest of the year. They're 11th in pass rush win rate. Their corner, Tariq Woolen's grading out really well. The rookie, Kobe Bryant out of Cincinnati, starting to improve. I think this Seattle defense is a little underrated. And I think they did a good job over the last couple weeks holding Kyler Murray in the pocket, 9 points for Arizona. They held Justin Herbert, who's a pocket passer, to one of his lowest grades of the year. So they faced two very different styles of quarterbacks the last 2 weeks, Murray and Herbert, and they played very well against both of those guys. So we want to talk about Geno. Unbelievable story. I love what the Seattle offense is doing, but maybe the Seattle defense, a little under the radar here, with a first-year defensive coordinator that's starting to get his sea legs underneath him. That could be a hidden difference here, little hidden edge for the Seattle, spread. If you want to bet them, their defense may be playing a little bit better.